For my 70th birthday, my grandson Leo gave me a digital photo frame, a wonderful little window into my family's life. He said it would help me feel connected. He was right. A week later, due to a syncing error I'm still grateful for, it connected me directly to my son and daughter-in-law's secret chat logs. I saw every word of their plan to put me in a nursing home and steal my house. The gift that was meant to bring me joy was about to become my weapon. My name is Catherine. I'm a widow, and I live in the same quiet suburban house where my husband, Tom, and I raised our son, Paul. The house is too big for me now, I suppose. The silence in the evenings can be heavy, and the stairs seem to get steeper every year. But it's my home. It's a library of my life. Tom's favorite armchair is still in the living room, and my son's height is still marked in faint pencil on the pantry door frame. These are the things that keep me company. Paul is a good son, or so I had always believed. He's a successful man, a vice president at some downtown firm. He and his wife, Amanda, have a life filled with important meetings, dinner reservations, and weekend trips I only hear about afterward. They are good, dutiful children. They call me every Sunday evening. They send a professionally arranged bouquet of flowers on my birthday. They handle the major repairs on the house, hiring people to do the work I can no longer manage. Their care is efficient, organized, and always feels like it's being checked off a to-do list. It is an arrangement of meticulously managed love. The real, uncomplicated warmth in my life comes from my grandson, Leo. He's 10 years old, a whirlwind of boundless energy and surprising sensitivity. He's the only one who doesn't see me as a fragile problem to be managed. To him, I'm just grandma. I'm the one who knows how to make his favorite chocolate chip cookies, the one who will listen for an hour as he explains the intricate rules of a video game I don't understand. He is the unfiltered, unconditional love that reminds me of what family is supposed to feel like. So, for my 70th birthday, when Paul and Amanda presented me with an expensive but rather impersonal cashmere sweater, I smiled and thanked them. But when Leo came forward, proudly holding a clumsily wrapped box, my heart genuinely soared. "Happy birthday, Grandma," he said, his face beaming. "I used my own savings for this. I saw my mom and dad had one, and it's really cool. It shows pictures all day, so you'll never be lonely." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside a white box was a sleek, white-bordered screen, a digital photo frame. I am, admittedly, a technological dinosaur. The smartphone Paul insists on buying me every 2 years is a source of constant, low-grade anxiety. I use it only to make and receive calls. "I have no idea how to work this, sweetie," I confessed, turning the frame over in my hands. "Don't worry, I'll set it all up," Leo said, brimming with the effortless confidence of a digital native. He went about his work with the focus of a bomb disposal expert, plugging in cords, tapping on the screen, and connecting it to my home's Wi-Fi network. I just sat and watched him, my heart full. This was the real gift. His time, his enthusiasm, his simple desire to share his world with me. Leo went about his task with the solemn focus of a NASA engineer preparing for a rocket launch. He uncoiled wires, consulted the small instruction booklet with a serious frown, and navigated the on-screen menus with an intuitive speed that was both dazzling and completely baffling to me. I simply sat in my armchair, watching him, a fond smile on my face. Paul and Amanda were on the sofa, scrolling through their own phones, a universe away. But Leo was here, a small, vibrant sun of energy in my quiet living room. "Okay, Grandma, so it's connected to the internet now," he announced, looking up at me with a proud grin. A small blue light on the frame was blinking steadily. "But how do the pictures get on it, sweetie?" I asked. "Do I have to plug it into that complicated computer in the den?" "Nope. That's the magic part," he said, his eyes alight with the joy of explaining something wonderful to a novice. I logged into Mom and Dad's family iCloud account. See, we have this thing called a shared album. I made a new one and called it Grandma's Frame. So now, whenever Mom or Dad takes a picture on their phones, all they have to do is add it to that album and poof. He made a small, explosive gesture with his hands. It shows up right here, like magic. The concept was almost too much for my analog mind to grasp. A direct, invisible pipeline from their lives into mine. Leo, sensing my wonder, elaborated. So when I have my soccer game next Saturday, Dad can take pictures from the sidelines and you'll see them right away, even before we get home. And when they go on their trip to Napa next month, you can see all the pictures of the vineyards as they're taking them. It'll be like you're right there with us. From the sofa, Amanda looked up from her phone, a pleased, slightly detached smile on her face. That's brilliant, Leo. What a thoughtful gift. It will make it so much easier for us to share things with your grandma. Easier for us. The words, meant to be encouraging, had a subtle, telling edge. Great job, son, Paul added, not looking up from his screen. Now your grandma can see what we're up to without us having to remember to email her photos all the time. Remembering was the chore. This device was the convenient, automated solution. I chose to ignore the subtext. I chose to focus on my grandson's pure, uncomplicated intention. Okay, let's test it, Leo said, scrambling to his feet. Dad, take a picture of me and Grandma right now. Paul sighed, the sigh of a busy man being interrupted, but he obliged. He stood up, pulled out his iPhone, and took a quick, perfunctory photo. There was no art to it, no time taken to frame the shot, just a click. Okay, now open your photos, Leo instructed, peering over his dad's shoulder like a tiny, demanding director. Find the picture, yep, that one. Now hit the share button and add it to the Grandma's Frame album. Paul tapped a few times on his screen, and then it happened. The blank white screen on the frame in front of me flickered, and a second later, an image resolved itself. It was the photo Paul had just taken. Me, sitting in my armchair looking slightly bewildered, with Leo leaning against the armrest, his face a supernova of a grin, his arm wrapped around my shoulder. The magic was real. A moment that had just happened was now here, captured and glowing on my mantelpiece. Oh, Leo, I gasped, my hand going to my chest. It's a miracle. See? Easy, he said, puffing out his chest with pride. To complete the demonstration, Paul and Amanda, now slightly more engaged, added a few more pictures to the album. A professionally taken photo of the two of them from a recent work gala, looking sleek and powerful. A funny picture of their beagle Barnaby with a sock in his mouth. A beautiful shot of Leo on the beach from their last summer vacation. After they had packed up to leave, after the hugs and the pecks on the cheek, I was left alone in the growing quiet of the late afternoon. But for the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't feel lonely. The frame on the mantel was a warm, living presence, its screen glowing softly as it cycled through the 4 images. My son and his wife, a reminder of their success. Their dog, a reminder of their home life. And me and Leo, a reminder of the pure, simple love that connected us all. I sat in my armchair, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands, and just watched the slideshow. A bridge, I thought to myself. My clever, wonderful grandson had built me a bridge into their busy modern world. It was a bridge that would carry their lives to me, a constant, reassuring stream of moments and memories. the thought filled me with a warmth that had nothing to do with the tea. The window had been opened, and I leaned forward, eager to see the beautiful view. The week that followed my birthday was one of the happiest I had experienced in a very long time. The digital frame, which I had initially regarded with the suspicion one reserves for a potentially explosive device, quickly became the warm, beating heart of my quiet house. It was my first stop in the morning. Before the kettle had even boiled for my tea, I would go into the living room, my steps quick with a new, youthful anticipation, to see what moments from my family's life had arrived overnight. The frame was a magical, ever-changing tapestry. One morning it would be a picture of Leo at bat during his Little League game, his face a mask of fierce concentration. A few hours later, a new photo would appear. Leo, grinning from ear to ear, holding a small plastic trophy. I could almost hear the crack of the bat, feel the warmth of the afternoon sun on the bleachers. I hadn't been there, but thanks to the frame, I had been able to witness his small triumph. It was a window into their world, a world that had so often felt distant and inaccessible. I saw photos of Paul, looking confident and important as he stood beside a whiteboard in a glass-walled conference room. I saw Amanda, looking serene and beautiful, doing a yoga pose on a beach during a weekend trip with her friends. I saw them at fancy restaurants, raising glasses of wine to the camera. I saw them on a hiking trail, rosy-cheeked and smiling, with Barnaby the beagle on a leash between them. To me, these weren't just pictures. They were offerings. They were proof that, despite their busy lives, they were thinking of me, that they were actively choosing to include me. The distance I had felt for so long began to melt away, replaced by a new and wonderful sense of inclusion. Our Sunday phone calls, which had so often been a stilted exchange of pleasantries, were transformed. "I saw the picture of your big presentation, Paul," I was able to say, my voice bright with genuine interest. "That office of yours looks like something out of a science fiction movie." He had sounded surprised and pleased. "Oh, yeah, that was the Q3 wrap-up. A long day." "And Amanda," I'd say, "that seafood tower you had on Friday night looked absolutely decadent. Was it as good as it looked?" For the first time in years, I wasn't just receiving a report on their lives. I was participating in the conversation. The frame had given me a foothold in their world, a common language to speak. I felt less like a distant elderly relative and more like a part of the family again. My friend Eleanor, who lives 2 houses down, came over for tea on Thursday. As we were sitting in the living room, the frame flickered and a new picture appeared. It was a selfie of Leo, his face so close to the camera that his nose was distorted, a piece of chocolate cake smeared on his cheek. We both laughed. "What is that magical device?" Eleanor had asked, her eyes wide. "It's my connection to the world," I had told her, my voice full of a pride I couldn't conceal. "My grandson Leo gave it to me. He set it up so I can see everything they're up to. Isn't it the most wonderful invention?" I felt so clever, so modern. The frame was my bridge to the 21st century. It was proof that I was not being left behind. I felt silly for my earlier suspicions about Paul and Amanda. I had mistaken their busy, modern efficiency for a lack of warmth. How wrong I had been. They had simply found a modern solution to the age-old problem of keeping a family connected. They were good children. They loved me. This little glowing rectangle on my mantel was the proof. The illusion of intimacy was complete. I saw the curated highlights of their lives, the smiles, the triumphs, the celebrations, and my loving grandmotherly heart filled in all the gaps. I saw the perfect family, and I believed I was its cherished, respected matriarch. My days felt brighter, the house less empty. The constant, gentle stream of new images was a reassuring presence, a digital heartbeat that assured me I was loved, I was included, and I was not alone. One evening, about 2 weeks after my birthday, I was getting ready for bed. I took one last look at the frame before turning out the living room lights. A new picture had just appeared. It was a perfect family selfie taken in their car. Paul was driving, smiling at the road. Amanda was in the passenger seat, leaning her head on his shoulder, her expression one of perfect contentment. And Leo was in the back, making a funny face at the camera. They looked so happy, so complete. My heart swelled with a love so powerful it felt like it might burst. I went to bed that night with a smile on my face, feeling utterly, completely secure in my family's love. I was perfectly happy, perfectly trusting, and perfectly, dangerously vulnerable. The digital frame became the quiet, constant companion of my days. Its gentle, glowing presence on the mantel filled a space in the house I didn't even know was empty. It was a river of moments, flowing directly from my family's life into mine, and I would spend hours just watching the current, mesmerized. I learned the rhythm of their lives through pictures. I knew Leo had soccer practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I knew Paul and Amanda had their date night every Friday. The frame was my almanac, my newspaper, my window, and the view, for 3 wonderful weeks, was absolutely perfect. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, the view changed. I was in the living room, curled up in Tom's old armchair with a book, the soft glow of the frame the only other light in the room. It was cycling through a familiar, comforting loop of recent images. Leo covered in mud after a soccer game, a beautiful sunset from Paul's office window, Amanda smiling with a friend over a glass of wine. And then a new image loaded. It wasn't a photograph. I sat up, leaning forward and squinting in the dim light. The image on the screen was stark, a black and white picture of text on a screen. It was a screenshot of a phone conversation, 2 text bubbles against a plain background. My first reaction was simple, mild confusion. The text itself was completely mundane. The first bubble from Amanda read, "Don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning on your way home." The reply from Paul read, "On it. Running late from the office. See you around 7. I stared at it for a full 30 seconds, my head tilted. Well, that's odd, I thought. The image was as out of place in the stream of smiling photos as a page from an instruction manual would be in the middle of a fairy tale. My mind immediately began to construct a series of perfectly logical, innocent explanations. Leo. It had to be Leo. He was always playing with his parents' phones. He must have been fiddling with it, accidentally taken a screenshot of their messages, and then, while trying to add a different photo to the Grandma's Frame album, his little finger must have slipped and selected the wrong image. It was a simple mistake, a child's harmless technological clumsiness. The thought made me smile. It was actually a little funny, a strange, secret glimpse into the boring, logistical underpinnings of their busy lives. Even glamorous people like Paul and Amanda had to remember to pick up the dry cleaning. It was a strangely humanizing little detail. Just as I was thinking this, the frame flickered, and the screenshot vanished, replaced by a picture of Barnaby the Beagle sleeping on a sofa. It was as if the glitch had never happened. The river of happy moments was flowing again, and the strange, out-of-place text message was gone, washed away downstream. But the image lingered in my mind. It had been an accident, I was sure of it, but it did make me wonder. Leo's explanation had been so clear. His parents would choose a photo and add it to the album, which meant that at some point, one of them had to have actively selected that screenshot and sent it to my frame. Why would they do that? The only other explanation was that the shared album wasn't as curated as Leo had described. Perhaps it was just a direct, unfiltered feed from their phones. The thought was a little unsettling, like the idea of an open microphone in a private room. I consciously pushed the thought away. It was a silly thing to worry about. They were my children. I had no interest in spying on their private conversations about dry cleaning. It was a mistake, plain and simple. The next day, Amanda called. It was her regular midweek check-in. "Hi, Catherine. Just calling to see how you are. Is everything all right?" "Everything is wonderful, dear," I told her, my voice full of genuine warmth. I was just admiring a new picture of Leo's science project that popped up. It looks like a volcano. "Oh, good, you saw that. Yes, he was so proud of it," she said, and we chatted for a few minutes about Leo. A part of me was tempted to mention the screenshot, to frame it as a funny little story. "You'll never guess what appeared on the frame last night. I think Leo might be playing with your phone again." But I stopped myself. Why? I suppose I didn't want to embarrass her. It felt like I would be admitting that I had seen something I wasn't supposed to see, that I had inadvertently eavesdropped on a private moment. It was their mistake, but mentioning it felt like an invasion of their privacy on my part. I wanted our newfound connection to remain perfect, unblemished by any awkwardness. So I said nothing. I kept their small, secret, boring message to myself. It was a tiny act of discretion, a decision to keep the peace. It was a choice I would come to regret more than any other. That evening, I sat watching the frame again. It was back to its regularly scheduled programming of smiles and successes. The screenshot was a distant memory, a harmless little technological hiccup. But somewhere, in the back of my mind, a tiny seed of unease had been planted. The window, which had seemed to show me a perfect sun-drenched landscape, had for a brief moment shown me something else. The plain, unadorned wall behind the beautiful painting. For a few days, the river of images flowed on, as placid and cheerful as before. The strange text message screenshot faded in my memory, dismissed as a harmless anomaly. The frame continued to be my joy, a constant, glowing affirmation of the happy, loving family I was so proud of. I saw Leo score another goal. I saw Paul and Amanda laughing at a charity gala. The world was as it should be. And then, on a quiet Friday afternoon, another glitch appeared in the perfect slideshow. I was in the kitchen, kneading dough for a loaf of bread when I glanced into the living room. Another black and white image, another screenshot had appeared on the frame. My first reaction was a flicker of annoyance. Really? Again? I thought. They need to be more careful. I dried my flour-dusted hands on my apron and walked into the living room for a closer look, expecting another mundane exchange about dry cleaning or errands. But this time, the words were not about errands. The words were about me. The first bubble was from Amanda. It said, "Your mom called again about the leaky faucet in her guest bathroom." The reply from my son Paul appeared a second later. God, it's always something. I just had the plumber there last month. So needy. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, the gentle scent of yeast and flour still clinging to my hands. I read the words again, and then a third time. So needy. The word was a physical blow. It struck the air from my lungs, leaving a cold, hollow space in its place. Needy? I thought, my mind racing. I had waited a week before calling, trying to fix the drip myself, precisely because I never, ever wanted to be a bother. I prided myself on my independence, on my self-sufficiency. To them, my quiet request for help with a broken pipe was not a simple necessity. It was a character flaw. I was needy. My first instinct, the desperate, loving instinct of a mother, was to make excuses for them. They were stressed, I told myself. Paul has a demanding job. Everyone vents now and then. They didn't really mean it. But the words were there, stark and cruel in their digital permanence. It's always something. As if my existence was just a long, inconvenient list of problems for them to solve. Before the pain of that first revelation could fully settle, the frame flickered again. It was another screenshot, this one clearly from a different day. Paul, Mom wants us to come for dinner on Sunday. Amanda, ugh, can you get us out of it? I was really hoping we could take Leo to that new science museum exhibit. Paul, I'll try. I'll tell her I have to work late. The guilt trip is just exhausting. This second message was a dagger to the heart. The Sunday dinners I so carefully planned, the calls I looked forward to all week, the visits that were the highlight of my quiet life. To them, they were a chore, an exhausting obligation to be dodged with lies. The carefully constructed facade of our happy, connected family began to crumble, and I could see the ugly, rotten foundation beneath. All the smiling photos of them on my mantel now seemed like a grotesque mockery. They weren't sharing their lives with me. They were curating a performance, and the text messages were the secret, ugly script. I sank into Tom's armchair, my legs suddenly weak. My breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. The gift for my grandson, my beautiful, magical window, had been transformed. It was no longer a source of joy. It was an instrument of torture, a pipeline, delivering a slow, steady drip of poison directly into my living room. Now, when it flickered to a new image, my heart would leap into my throat. I was torn between a desperate urge to unplug it, to smash it, to stop the flow of painful truths, and a morbid, terrible need to know more. What else? What else did they say about me when they thought I wasn't listening? The frame was no longer my companion, it was my tormentor. Later that evening, I sat in the darkness, the only light coming from the glowing rectangle on the mantel. It was showing a picture of Leo on the beach, his face full of innocent joy. But I couldn't see his smile. All I could see were the ghosts of the words I had read. Needy, a chore, exhausting. The foundation of my happy world had been fractured. The connection I had celebrated was an illusion, the intimacy, a lie. And the worst part was a cold, sickening certainty that this was not the end of it. This was just the beginning. The window was still open, and I now had a terrifying, irresistible urge to see just how dark and ugly the view could get. For 2 days, the frame was quiet. It showed me nothing but the familiar smiling faces from its existing loop of photos. It was a period of agonizing limbo. Every time the screen flickered, my stomach would clench, my breath catching in my throat. Was this it? Was another piece of the ugly truth about to be delivered? The silence was, in its own way, as tormenting as the messages had been. My home, once my sanctuary, now felt like a waiting room, and my beautiful photo frame had become a ticking bomb. I tried to rationalize, to cling to the rapidly shrinking hope that I had overreacted. They were just venting, I told myself again and again. Just words. They would never actually do anything. It was a desperate mantra, a prayer I repeated to ward off the encroaching darkness. On the third day, the bomb went off. I was watering my houseplants, my back to the mantelpiece, when a series of soft, almost imperceptible chimes came from the frame, signaling that several new photos had been added in quick succession. My heart began to pound a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I turned around slowly, a terrible magnetic dread pulling my eyes toward the glowing screen. It wasn't a photo. It was a long, scrolling screenshot, a coherent and undeniable conversation. My son and his wife. The first bubble was from Amanda, and it was the catalyst for everything that followed. Paul, the estimate for the new kitchen just came in. It's even higher than we thought. We're never going to be able to afford the down payment for the contractor unless we accelerate the plan for your mom's house. I felt a dizzying wave of nausea. My house, my quiet, comfortable, memory-filled house was not a home to them. It was a down payment. It was the key to unlocking their dream kitchen, with its marble countertops and designer appliances. I was an inconvenient tenant living inside their future renovation budget. Paul's reply appeared a moment later. I know. I'll handle it. Don't worry. Amanda's next message was sharp, impatient. You keep saying that. We need a real timeline. Have you looked into those assisted living places upstate? The ones we talked about last month? Upstate. The word was a punch to the gut. Not a nice community nearby where friends could visit. Upstate. Far away. A place of exile. I sank into Tom's armchair, my legs unable to support me, my eyes glued to the screen in horrified fascination. Paul's reply was damning in its practicality. I have a few brochures. There are some affordable options near the Catskills. The monthly rates are manageable. Affordable. The word was a euphemism I knew for a place that was understaffed, underfunded, and overwhelmingly depressing. The kind of place you put someone when you want to forget they exist. Amanda's response was even more chilling, a masterpiece of callous self-interest. Good. We need a place that's far enough away that her sister and those nosy old neighbors won't be dropping in all the time and asking questions. And honestly, we need to get her out before winter. The last thing we need is the roof needing thousands in repairs right before we put the house on the market. There it was, the full, monstrous scope of their plan, laid bare in the cold blue and gray bubbles of a text message conversation. They were going to ship me off to a cheap, distant facility. They were going to isolate me from my friends, from my sister, from everyone I knew. And they were doing it not out of any concern for my well-being, but out of a pragmatic fear that my aging house might cost them some of their precious profit. I was no longer a person to them. I was no longer their mother. I was a problem to be solved, an asset to be liquidated, an obstacle standing between them and their dream kitchen. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it felt like it was fundamentally altering my DNA, rewriting my entire history as a mother. The boy whose scraped knees I had kissed, whose fevers I had soothed, whose future I had sacrificed for, was now calmly and rationally planning my disposal. I stared at the screen, at the terrible, damning words, until the frame's slideshow timer kicked in and the image was replaced by the perfect, smiling family selfie that had once brought me so much joy. The three of them beaming in the car. It was the most grotesque, horrifying image I had ever seen. The smiling faces of my son and his wife were no longer the faces of my family. They were the smiling, friendly masks of my captors, the architects of my doom. The illusion was not just cracked, it had been vaporized. My world had been turned completely inside out. My safe, quiet home was now a property to be seized. My loving children were my enemies. And the beautiful gift from my grandson, the magical window that had promised to bring me happiness and connection, had become a portal to a nightmare. The days that followed were a masterclass in self-control. I lived with a constant churning sea of rage and grief just beneath my placid surface. The photo frame on the mantel was a constant mocking reminder of the truth. I wanted to take a hammer to it, to smash its glowing, lying screen into 1,000 pieces. But I couldn't. It was my only witness. It was my only weapon. So I let it cycle through its slideshow of fabricated happiness. And with every smiling picture of my son, I felt a piece of my own heart turn to stone. I knew they would be visiting that weekend. It was their routine. But for the first time in my life, I dreaded their arrival. Before, their visits were a welcome break in the monotony of my week. Now, their impending arrival felt like a home invasion. I was no longer preparing to welcome my family. I was preparing to face my enemies. They arrived on Saturday afternoon, a perfect portrait of the happy family. Leo ran to me immediately, wrapping his arms around my legs in a hug that was both a comfort and a sharp, painful reminder of his innocence in all of this. Paul and Amanda followed, their smiles as bright and empty as a department store display. "Hi, Mom," Paul said, kissing my cheek. "We brought you those croissants you like from the French bakery." "And I picked up a new orchid for you," Amanda added, handing me a potted plant. The old one was looking a little sad. The casual cruelty of it, replacing my old familiar plant with something new and fashionable, was not lost on me. It was a small symbolic gesture of their larger plan to replace me, the old sad fixture, with something more convenient. I smiled and thanked them, my voice a perfect imitation of the grateful, slightly dotty mother they believed me to be. "That's so thoughtful of you both. Let me get a vase. Oh, wait, it's already in a pot. How lovely." The performance was exhausting. Every polite word felt like a lie I was telling on behalf of my own soul. We sat in the living room, Leo on the floor with his Legos, and the three of us engaging in the careful, scripted conversation that had become our family's language. But this time, I was a different character in the play. I was no longer the unsuspecting audience member. I was a counterintelligence agent, listening to every word, analyzing every inflection, searching for the first move in their campaign. It came from Amanda, as I knew it would. She looked around the room, a look of faint, feigned concern on her face. "Catherine, you seem a little tired today. Are you sure you're managing all right here all by yourself? This big house must be a lot to keep up with." I saw Paul nod in agreement, his expression serious. "We worry, Mom. We really do. With winter just around the corner, what if the furnace goes out? What if we get a bad snowstorm and you're stuck here alone?" They were building a case, brick by brick, constructing a prison of concern around me. And then Paul, my son, gently and carefully laid the first piece of their trap. "You know," he said, his tone casual, as if the thought had just occurred to him, "a friend of mine from work, his mother went for a short respite stay at a lovely place up in the Catskills after she had a bad fall. Just for a couple of weeks, to get her strength back. It was fantastic. They had gourmet chefs, art classes, 24-hour nursing care. He said she came back completely rejuvenated." There it was, a respite stay. The lie from the text message, now spoken aloud in my own living room, wrapped in a comforting anecdote. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it, but I kept my expression one of mild, weary interest. "Oh, I don't know, Paul," I said, sighing and shaking my head, playing my part. "The thought of leaving my own home. I'm perfectly fine here. A bit of a leaky faucet now and then is hardly a reason to pack my bags." Leo, who had been engrossed in his Legos, looked up, his brow furrowed with the simple, devastating logic of a child. "But why would Grandma leave her house?" he asked, looking at his father. "All her stuff is here. Her garden is here." Amanda shot him a look that was a mixture of annoyance and warning. "It would just be for a little while, sweetie," she said, her voice a little too sweet. "Like a vacation for Grandma, so she could rest and be pampered." They saw my hesitation as the natural reluctance of an old woman afraid of change. They had no idea it was the calculated pause of a general watching her enemy advance into a pre-planned ambush. They left an hour later, believing they had successfully planted the seed. I could see it in their satisfied glances at each other as they walked to the car. They thought I was considering their thoughtful suggestion. I closed the door behind them, my back sliding down the cool wood until I was sitting on the floor. The performance had left me utterly drained. My body was trembling, not from weakness, but from the sheer effort of containing my rage. The attack had begun. It was no longer a theoretical plot on a glowing screen. They were actively trying to remove me from my life, and I, in my quiet, smiling compliance, had just let them believe they could win. The week that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Having planted the seed of the respite stay, my children now began to water it with a steady, gentle stream of concern. Amanda would call and leave cheerful voicemails. "Hi, Catherine. Just saw an article about the therapeutic benefits of a short-term change of scenery for seniors. Made me think of you." Paul would email me links to articles about the dangers of social isolation in the elderly. They were building their case, creating a paper trail of their loving diligence. I deleted the emails and let the voicemails go unanswered. They came over the following Saturday, not with croissants, but with the file folder and the grimly determined air of financial planners about to deliver a difficult but necessary presentation. They found me in the garden, and we sat on the porch swing, the same swing where Tom had asked me to marry him. The sacredness of the space was clearly lost on them. "Mom," Paul began, getting straight to the point. "We've been doing some thinking. If you do decide to try that little respite stay we talked about, even just for a month, there are some logistical things we need to sort out. We'll need to be able to manage your bills for you while you're gone," Amanda added, her tone practical and efficient. "The mortgage is paid off, thank goodness, but there's still the property taxes, the utilities, the homeowner's insurance. We wouldn't want anything to fall through the cracks while you're relaxing." It was a brilliant maneuver. They were using my own home, the very thing they wanted to steal, as the pretext for gaining control of my finances. "To do that," Paul continued, leaning forward, his expression a perfect blend of sincerity and authority, "the simplest, cleanest way would be for me to be a joint holder on your main checking account. It's just a simple form at the bank. That way, I can pay all the bills directly, transfer funds if needed. It just makes everything seamless. You won't have to worry about a thing." "It would give us such peace of mind, Catherine," Amanda cooed. "It's just good, responsible planning." I looked at my son, at his earnest, handsome face, and I felt a profound sense of dislocation. It was like watching a movie where a beloved, familiar actor was playing the role of a monster. The face was the same, but the soul behind the eyes was a terrifying stranger's. I played my part. I became the woman they wanted me to be, the financially naive, slightly overwhelmed widow. "Oh my," I said, sighing and shaking my head. "It's all so complicated. Tom always handled these things. I suppose that makes sense." My compliance emboldened them. This was going even better than they had planned. "Great," Paul said, a little too quickly. "And just so we have a complete picture, to make sure everything is secure, we should probably make a list of any other accounts you have. You know, any savings, CDs, investment accounts, just so we can keep an eye on things for you. This was it, the reconnaissance mission. They weren't just taking control, they were taking inventory of their future inheritance. Well, I said, feigning a confused effort of memory. There's the savings account at the credit union, and I think Tom left some bonds for me. The paperwork is in the big desk in the den, I believe, in the bottom drawer. Perfect, Paul said, a glint of triumph in his eyes. We'll get all that paperwork together for you. We'll make a neat little file. As he spoke, my gaze drifted past him into the living room. Through the window, I could see the digital frame on the mantelpiece. And at that exact moment, an old photo cycled onto the screen. It was a picture from 25 years ago. My husband, Tom, standing behind a much younger Paul, his hands on Paul's shoulders. They were both smiling, their faces full of a shared, uncomplicated love. The painful irony of the image, appearing at the very moment my son was plotting his financial takeover, was a physical blow. The man in the picture and the boy in the picture were gone, leaving only me and this greedy stranger on my porch. The visit ended with their victory complete. They had a list of my assets, and they had my agreement to give them control. They promised to come back in a few days with the forms from the bank for me to sign. They left, convinced of their own brilliance, believing they were just 1 or 2 signatures away from total victory. I remained on the porch swing long after their car had disappeared down the street. I watched the old photograph of my husband and my son glowing on the mantel. They had shown me their entire strategy. They had revealed their whole hand. And now, I knew with a cold, absolute certainty what my next move had to be. It was time to invite the entire family for dinner. The day after their visit, the house was profoundly quiet. The file folder with the bank forms they had left on the coffee table felt like an unexploded bomb. They were due to return in a few days for my signature. The clock was ticking. I spent the day in a state of cold, quiet contemplation, a general reviewing maps before a decisive battle. The photo frame on the mantel continued its cheerful, silent broadcast of their lies, but I no longer felt the sting of pain. I felt a clarifying, surgical anger. The question was no longer if I would fight back, but how. I saw 3 paths before me. The first was the path of direct, messy confrontation. I could call them, scream at them, accuse them, tell them I knew everything. I could already hear Paul's response, his voice full of practiced, wounded concern. "Mom, what are you talking about? You must have misunderstood. You've been under so much stress since the surgery." Amanda would be smoother. "Catherine, that's a terrible thing to say. We would never." They would deny it all. They would gaslight me, call me confused, paranoid, senile. It would be my word against theirs, and I knew whose version of reality the world was more likely to believe. That path led only to a bitter, unresolved stalemate. The second path was the legal one. I could call Arthur, and we could begin a long, ugly war of lawyers and court filings. It would be a brutal, public affair, dragging our family name through the mud. It would drain my savings, and more importantly, it would drain the last of my energy and my will to live. I would win, eventually, but the victory would be a hollow one, achieved at a terrible cost. Then there was the third path. It was the riskiest, the most theatrical, but also the most complete. A confrontation, yes, but not a private one. A trial, but not in a courtroom. I would not allow them to hide behind denials or legal maneuvers. I would force them to face their treachery in a court of our own family's public opinion, in front of the very people whose respect they so desperately craved. It was not just about stopping them anymore. It was about delivering a lesson in honor, a lesson they had clearly never learned. I chose the third path. That afternoon, I began to make the calls. I started with my sister, Martha, the one Amanda was so worried about. "Martha, dear, it's Catherine," I said, my voice full of a warmth I did not feel. "I'm having a special family dinner next Saturday evening. I'm going to be making an important announcement about my future, and I would love for you to be there." One by one, I called the key members of our family. Paul's favorite uncle from his father's side, my cousin Sarah, whom Amanda always tried so hard to impress. My story was the same for each of them, a special dinner, an important announcement, a celebration of a new chapter in my life. The bait was irresistible. Everyone accepted with enthusiasm. The final call was the hardest. I took a deep breath and dialed my son. "Hi, Mom," Paul answered, his voice bright. "Everything okay?" "Everything is wonderful, dear," I said, my voice a perfect imitation of a happy, contented mother. "I've been doing so much thinking since you and Amanda visited. You've given me so much to consider, and you are both so right. It's time for me to start a new chapter." I could almost hear the triumphant, silent fist pump on the other end of the line. "Mom, that's fantastic news," he said, his voice full of poorly concealed glee. "I'm so glad you're seeing it that way." "I am," I continued, "and I've made a decision about everything. The house, my finances, my future. And it's such big news I want to announce it to the whole family at once, to celebrate. I'm having everyone over for a big dinner next Saturday. Can you, Amanda, and of course my sweet Leo, be here?" "Of course," he said, his voice practically bubbling. "We wouldn't miss it for the world. Mom, I'm so proud of you. This is the right decision, the responsible decision." "I think so too," I said, the lie tasting like poison. We hung up and I sank back into my chair, my body trembling with the aftershock of the performance. The invitations had been sent. The guests had RSVP'd. My children were walking into the trap, not with suspicion, but with giddy, self-congratulatory excitement, believing this dinner was to be their coronation. I looked over at the digital photo frame. It was showing a picture of Amanda, smiling beautifully, a glass of champagne in her hand. For weeks, this object had been my tormentor, a source of pain and betrayal. Now, as I looked at it, I saw it for what it truly was. It wasn't a window. It wasn't a bridge. It was a mirror. And at my dinner party, I was going to force my children to finally take a long, hard look at their own reflection. The day of the dinner party, my house was a stage, and I was its sole director, producer, and lead actor. I spent the day preparing, every action deliberate and imbued with a strange, final meaning. I polished my best silver. I starched the linen napkins. I arranged flowers in a crystal vase. I cooked a standing rib roast, a meal reserved for the most special of family occasions, its rich, savory aroma filling the house with a sense of warmth and tradition that was a complete and utter lie. The house looked perfect. I looked perfect. The illusion was complete. My sister Martha was the first to arrive, her face full of loving, worried concern. "Catherine, are you sure about this?" she whispered as she hugged me at the door. "Paul told me you were thinking of moving, but it all seems so sudden." "All will be explained, dear," I said, patting her arm with a reassuring smile I did not feel. "I'm so glad you're here." Soon the house was full. Paul's Uncle Robert arrived, a booming, cheerful man who had always been my husband's closest confidant. My cousin Sarah and her husband came, Amanda's primary social rivals, their eyes already scanning my home for any sign of decline. The room filled with the cheerful, oblivious chatter of a family gathering for a happy occasion. Paul, Amanda, and Leo were the last to arrive, making their entrance like the guests of honor at a gala thrown for them. They were glowing. Paul was expansive, accepting pats on the back from his uncle. Amanda was the picture of a gracious, supportive daughter-in-law, accepting praise from my sister for finally getting Catherine to be practical. They moved through the room, basking in the warm glow of the family's approval, completely unaware that they were the architects of their own impending doom. Leo, my sweet, innocent Leo, ran straight to me, oblivious to the currents of deception swirling around him. We sat down to dinner at the long dining table, the one Tom and I had bought at an antique store on our first anniversary. The conversation was lively, full of family gossip and fond reminiscences, and it was pure, exquisite torture. "You know, Paul," Uncle Robert said, raising his wine glass, "your father would be so proud of you and Amanda, looking out for your mother like this. It's what a good son does." "We're just doing what's best for Mom," Paul said, his face a perfect mask of humble duty. "Her happiness and safety are our #1 priority." Amanda nodded in serene agreement, a modern-day saint. I smiled serenely, took a sip of water, and let the lies wash over me. I was the gracious host, the loving matriarch, presiding over this last supper. I watched them, my children, as they laughed and accepted the family's praise. I watched them perform their roles, and I felt a strange, chilling sense of detachment. The grief was gone, replaced by a surgeon's cold focus. The disease had been diagnosed. The time had come to cut it out. "Grandma's new photo frame is so cool, isn't it?" Leo piped up, his voice cutting through the adult conversation. "Now she can see all our pictures. I helped her set it up." "Yes, you did, sweetie," Amanda said, smiling at him. "It's so important for Grandma to feel connected." The irony was a physical thing, a lump in my throat that I had to swallow past. When dinner was finished and I had served the dessert and coffee, a quiet, expectant hush fell over the room. Everyone turned to look at me, their faces full of anticipation. Paul and Amanda exchanged a small, triumphant smile. This was their moment. This was the public validation of their successful campaign. I rose slowly from my seat at the head of the table. I picked up my coffee cup, my hand perfectly steady. I looked around at the faces of my family, the people who had known me my entire life. "Thank you all so much for coming tonight," I began, my voice clear and strong. "It means so much to have you all here. As most of you know, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about the future, and I've made some very important decisions." I saw Paul and Amanda straighten in their chairs, their smiles widening. "And I will share those decisions with you in just a moment," I continued. "But first, before the main announcement, I want to share something truly special with all of you. I want to show you the wonderful, magical birthday gift that my grandson Leo gave me." I gestured towards the archway that led to the living room, where the large television was dark and the small photo frame was glowing softly on the mantel. "If you'll all join me in the living room, the show is about to begin." I turned and walked out of the dining room, not looking back to see if they were following. I knew they were. They were like moths drawn to the flame of their own greed, and they had no idea that I was the one about to strike the match. The family settled into the living room, a soft, expectant murmur filling the air. My sister Martha and cousin Sarah took the main sofa, while Uncle Robert lowered himself into Tom's big armchair. Paul and Amanda, the guests of honor in this secret trial, positioned themselves on the love seat, looking proud, confident, and magnanimous. Leo, thrilled that his gift was the center of attention, plopped down on the floor right in front of the television, his face tilted up in happy anticipation. I went over to the mantelpiece and picked up the small white frame. I turned to my grandson. "Now, Leo, sweetie, you'll have to help your old grandma with this part. I know it can connect to the television, but I haven't the faintest idea how to make it work." Easy, he said, jumping up. He took the remote from my hand and a cable from behind the TV and, with the effortless competence of his generation, had the frame's display mirrored on the large screen in under a minute. His innocent contribution to his parents' downfall was a tragedy too deep for words. He was sharpening the knife that was about to gut his own family. "There you go, Grandma," he said, handing me the small remote. "Now whatever is on the frame will be on the TV. You just have to press the arrow buttons to go through the pictures." He returned to his spot on the floor, a proud smile on his face. I took a deep breath. The show was about to begin. I pressed the play button. The slideshow started just as I had planned, with the happy, curated images of their lives. A beautiful photo of the autumn leaves from their trip to Vermont appeared on the screen. "Oh, how lovely," my sister Martha said. Next, a picture of Leo holding his soccer trophy, his face beaming. "There's our little champion," Uncle Robert boomed, and the family chuckled warmly. A photo of Paul and Amanda at the charity gala, looking like a movie star couple. A picture of Barnaby the beagle, asleep on their pristine white sofa. The family selfie in the car. For 5 minutes, a gentle, pleasant slideshow of a happy, successful family played out on the screen. Paul and Amanda were visibly relaxing, basking in this public display of their perfect life. This was all going exactly as they'd planned. They thought this was a sentimental preamble to my announcement, a final, fond look at the past before I gracefully exited stage left. I let the happy slideshow loop through one more time. Then, as the picture of them at the gala reappeared, I picked up the remote and pressed pause. "It's amazing, isn't it?" I said, my voice calm and conversational, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Modern technology, it shows you everything, all the beautiful, smiling moments." I paused, letting my eyes drift from the screen to my son and his wife. "And sometimes it shows you the little moments in between, the private thoughts, the planning. It all gets saved, you see, to the cloud." The way I said the words, private thoughts, sent a subtle, almost imperceptible chill through the room. Paul and Amanda's smiles became a little more fixed, a little less relaxed. I pressed the forward arrow on the remote. The glamorous photo of them was replaced by the stark black and white screenshot of their text messages about the dry cleaning. A confused murmur went through the room. "What's that, Catherine?" Martha asked, leaning forward and squinting. Paul and Amanda exchanged a quick, panicked glance. "Oh, that was the first little glitch I noticed," I said, my voice still light, a hostess explaining a curious novelty. "A little peek behind the curtain. Harmless, really. Just a mistake." I clicked the arrow again. The next image filled the screen. A new screenshot. Amanda. "Your mom called again about the leaky faucet in her guest bathroom." Paul. "God, it's always something. So needy." The room fell instantly, completely silent. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. My sister gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Uncle Robert, who had been leaning back comfortably, sat bolt upright in his chair, his cheerful expression replaced by one of grim, thunderous shock. Paul and Amanda had gone rigid, their faces draining of all color. They were staring at the screen, at their own cruel words magnified for their entire family to see, with the looks of people who had just witnessed a ghost. I did not give them time to recover. I did not give them time to form a lie. My finger, cold and steady, pressed the arrow on the remote one more time. A third screenshot appeared, the words huge and damning on the 60-inch screen. Paul, Mom wants us to come for dinner on Sunday. Amanda, ugh, can you get us out of it? I was really hoping we could take Leo to that new science museum exhibit. Paul, I'll try. I'll tell her I have to work late. The guilt trip is just exhausting. The trap had been sprung. There was no escape. There were no excuses. There was only the ugly, undeniable truth glowing in the dark of my living room for all to see. The silence in the living room was a physical weight. It was the sound of shock, of disgust, of a family's entire history being horrifically rewritten in real time. The text message, with its casual cruelty about my visits being an exhausting guilt trip, still glowed on the television screen. My sister Martha was staring at Amanda, her expression one of utter, betrayed disbelief. Uncle Robert's face was a thundercloud of silent, simmering rage. Paul and Amanda had shrunk into the cushions of the love seat, their faces as pale and brittle as old parchment. I let the silence stretch for a long, agonizing moment. Then I raised the remote again. My voice, when I spoke, was not angry. It was cold, clear, and steady, like a sheet of ice forming on a winter lake. As you can see, I said to the stunned room, my children have been very busy. But their private conversations weren't just about their social calendars or my supposed neediness. They were also making plans, big plans, for me, for my future. I clicked the arrow on the remote. A new screenshot, a new chapter of their betrayal, filled the screen. Amanda. Paul, the estimate for the new kitchen just came in. It's even higher than we thought. We're never going to be able to afford the down payment for the contractor unless we accelerate the plan for your mom's house. A low groan came from Uncle Robert. The raw, transactional nature of the message, my home, the house his brother had built, reduced to a down payment for a kitchen renovation, was an insult to his brother's memory. He looked at his nephew Paul with an expression of profound, scorching contempt. I gave them no time to recover. I clicked the remote again. Amanda, have you looked into those assisted living places upstate? Paul, I have a few brochures. There are some affordable options near the Catskills. Upstate? My sister Martha whispered, her voice trembling. They were going to send you upstate? The word affordable hung in the air, a clear and ugly euphemism for a cheap, forgotten place at the end of the world. Click. The next screenshot appeared. Paul, we'll tell her it's a respite stay, just a temporary thing. Amanda, good. We need a place that's far enough away that her sister and those nosy old neighbors won't be dropping in all the time and asking questions. Martha gasped, her hand flying to her chest as if she'd been physically struck. She was the sister in the message. I was the subject, but she was the collateral damage, a part of the family to be cut off and managed. She looked at Amanda, her niece-in-law, with eyes that were now cold with judgment. The lie was not just against me. It was against all of them. A plan to isolate me from their love and concern. With every click of the remote, I was systematically dismantling my children's lives. The respect they had commanded, the image they had so carefully cultivated was being torn to shreds in front of the very people whose opinions they valued most. Amanda had begun to cry, but they were silent, humiliated tears, her face buried in her hands. Paul was just staring at the screen, his face a blank, vacant mask of a man who was watching his own world end. I had one final piece of evidence to present. I clicked the remote one last time. Amanda, do you have any idea how much is in her savings account? Paul, a decent amount, I think. We need to convince her to add me as a joint holder, just for safety, and to help her pay bills. It was the final, irrefutable proof of their premeditated plan to seize control of my finances. The last layer of their deception, stripped away for all to see. In the crushing silence that followed, a small, confused voice piped up from the floor. It was Leo. He had been watching, his face a mask of confusion. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the terrible, heavy atmosphere in the room. He looked at his crying mother, his catatonic father, and then up at me, his eyes wide with fear. "Grandma?" he asked, his voice a small, trembling thing. "What's wrong? Why is Mommy crying? What do those words mean?" The innocent question was a final, heartbreaking twist of the knife. He was the collateral damage in his parents' greedy war, his happy, simple world shattered in a way he couldn't yet comprehend. My heart ached for him, for the terrible, necessary lesson he was being forced to witness. The last screenshot faded from the screen, and the slideshow, on its automated loop, returned to the first image. The perfect family selfie in the car. The three of them, Paul, Amanda, and Leo, were smiling, their faces a portrait of a happiness that I now knew was a complete and utter lie. The contrast was sickening. I looked at my grandson, and then I looked at my son and his wife. The evidence had been presented. The case was closed. All that was left was the sentencing. The happy, smiling selfie of my son's family glowed on the television, a grotesque monument to a life that had just been proven to be a lie. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Amanda's hitched, humiliated sobs. My family, my real family, sat frozen, their faces a mixture of horror, pity, and a cold, rising anger on my behalf. Paul and Amanda were radioactive, and no one dared to move towards them. I was the one who broke the spell. With a calm, deliberate slowness, I walked to the television and pressed the power button. The screen went black, plunging the room into a softer, more somber light. The show was over. My first thought was not of my son, but of my grandson. I went to where Leo was still sitting on the floor, his face pale and frightened, looking from his crying mother to my own grim expression. I knelt down in front of him, my old knees protesting, and put my hands on his small shoulders. "Leo, sweetie," I said, my voice soft, trying to shield him with my tone from the adult ugliness that had just poisoned my home. "Why don't you go into the kitchen for me? I baked those chocolate chip cookies you love. They're on the cooling rack. Grandma just needs to talk to the grown-ups for another minute." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine for an explanation he was too young to understand. He nodded silently, scrambled to his feet, and fled the terrible, heavy silence of the living room. Once he was gone, I stood up and faced the room. I first looked at my sister, at my cousin, at my husband's brother. "To my family," I said, my voice clear and steady. "My sister, my family who I love, I am so deeply sorry that you had to be a witness to this. I did not do this for your entertainment. I did it for the truth. You deserve to know. Now you know the kind of people my son and his wife have become." A wave of sad, supportive murmurs went through the room. Then I turned my gaze to the love seat. I looked at the two people who had been my son and my daughter-in-law, and I delivered my verdict. "The two of you," I said, my voice dropping, losing all its warmth, becoming as cold and hard as granite. "You have sat in my home, eaten my food, and accepted my love, all while you were plotting to take everything from me, my home, my money, my future. You have used my love for you, and my love for your innocent son as a weapon against me. You have disrespected the memory of my husband in the very house he built for us." I paused, letting the weight of their sins settle on them. "The beautiful kitchen you were planning," I said, my voice cutting. "The house and the savings account you were so eager to get your hands on, they are no longer your concern. They will never be your concern." I took a final look at them, at their shattered, pathetic forms, and I delivered the sentence. I believe it's time for you to leave my home." The finality in my voice was absolute. There was no room for argument, for excuses, for tearful, false apologies. It was over. Amanda was the first to move. With a choked sob, she stumbled to her feet, not looking at anyone, and fled towards the entryway. Paul remained frozen for a moment longer, a hollowed-out man, the ghost of a son. He looked at me, his face a ruin of shame and disbelief. "Mom," he whispered, the word a ragged, empty sound. "Go get your son, Paul," I said, my voice flat, "and then get out of my house." He flinched as if I had slapped him. He stood up slowly, a man who had aged 30 years in the last 10 minutes, and followed his wife. I heard their hushed, urgent voices in the kitchen as they collected Leo. I heard the front door open and then click shut. And then they were gone. The living room was filled with a thick, sorrowful silence. My sister Martha came to me, wrapping her arms around me in a tight, protective hug. "Oh, Catherine," she wept softly. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." Uncle Robert came and stood beside me, placing a heavy, comforting hand on my shoulder. "You did what you had to do, Catherine," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Tom would be proud of your strength." There was no celebration. There was no feeling of victory. It was a wake. We had all just witnessed the death of a family, the self-inflicted destruction of my son. My family stayed with me for another hour, their presence a quiet, supportive shield. But when they had all departed, I was left alone in the echoing silence of my home. The photo frame on the mantel was dark. I had won. I had saved my home. I had reclaimed my dignity. But the price had been my own child. And as I stood there in the center of my quiet, empty living room, I had never felt so victorious, and I had never felt so profoundly, utterly alone. I woke the next morning to a house that was unnervingly quiet. For a moment, suspended in the hazy space between sleep and consciousness, I thought it was just another Sunday. Then the memory of the night before crashed down upon me, a physical weight that seemed to press me deeper into my mattress. The disastrous dinner, the horrified faces of my family, the look of utter ruin on my son's face. It had all been real. My body felt heavy, as if I had run a marathon. The emotional toll of the confrontation had left me utterly drained. I made my way downstairs, my hand brushing against the wall for support. In the living room, the evidence of the previous night's battle was still there. A few abandoned coffee cups, a plate with a half-eaten piece of cake. And on the mantelpiece, the digital photo frame, its screen dark. It had gone into sleep mode overnight, but to me, it looked like a tombstone. The phone started ringing just after 9. It was my sister, Martha, her voice a low, comforting murmur. "Catherine, I just wanted to see how you were," she said. "I didn't sleep a wink. I'm still in shock. I can't believe Paul and Amanda could be so cruel, so deceitful." "I'm all right, Martha," I said, and was surprised to find that it was mostly true. I was heartbroken, but I was not broken. "Thank you for being here last night." "Of course," she said fiercely. "We're your family, the real one. If you need anything at all, you call me." An hour later, Uncle Robert called, his voice a grim rumble. "Catherine, I trust you're holding up. I want you to know, if Paul tries to contact you, if he tries to start with his apologies, you don't have to speak to him. He's made his bed. He's a grown man and he needs to lie in it." Their calls were a balm on my wounded soul. The family, the one built on genuine love and history, was closing ranks around me, protecting me. As if on cue, my cell phone, which had been silent on the kitchen counter, buzzed. I looked down and saw Paul's name on the screen. It was a text message. My hand trembled as I opened it. "Mom, I am so sorry. I don't know what to say. Amanda is a wreck. We weren't thinking clearly. Please, can we just talk?" I stared at the words. We weren't thinking clearly. It was an excuse, not an apology. An attempt to reframe premeditated cruelty as a temporary lapse in judgment. A few minutes later, another message arrived. "Mom, you can't just cut us out like this. I'm your son. Please answer me." I felt a profound, aching emptiness. There was no remorse in his words, only the panic of a man who had been caught and was now trying to mitigate his losses. I held my finger over the screen, over his name, and then I pressed delete. I deleted, but it felt like slamming a heavy iron door shut on a lifetime of pain. The hardest part of the day came that afternoon. The phone rang again. It was Leo, calling from his iPad. His small, worried voice was a dagger in my heart. "Grandma?" he asked. "Why is Mommy still crying? And Daddy is just sitting in his office and won't talk to me. Are you mad at them? Are they mad at you?" I had to close my eyes, fighting back a wave of tears. How could I explain this to him? How could I tell him that the family he loved was a lie, that his parents were not the people he thought they were? I couldn't. He was the innocent, the ultimate victim of their greed. "Oh, sweetie," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I tried to hide. "The grown-ups just had a very sad disagreement. It has nothing to do with you, do you understand? Nothing at all." "But are you mad at me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Never," I said, the word a fierce, protective promise. "Your grandma loves you more than anything in this world, always and forever. Don't you ever forget that." We spoke for a few more minutes, but I knew, with a certainty that broke my heart, that this might be one of our last conversations for a very long time. His parents, in their shame and anger, would use him as a pawn. They would cut him off from me to punish me. After we hung up, I walked back into the living room. The house was quiet. The family had called. The lines had been drawn. The most painful goodbye had been said. There was only one thing left to do. I walked to the mantelpiece and picked up the digital photo frame. I held the source of my pain and my liberation in my hands. Then I walked to the wall and unplugged it. The screen went black. The constant lying stream of images was over. I had taken back control of the story. I found the original box in the hall closet and carefully packed the frame away, along with its cords and remote. I closed the lid, taped it shut, and pushed it into the back of the closet, into the darkness where it belonged. Spring has returned to Maple Street. The brutal cold of the winter has given way to a gentle, persistent warmth, and the first brave crocuses are pushing their way through the damp soil in my garden. It has been 6 months since the night of the dinner party. 6 months since my world was fractured and then remade. The house is quiet, but it is a different kind of quiet now. The heavy, oppressive silence of loneliness has been replaced by the light, airy silence of peace. I have not seen or spoken to my son since that night. The silence from him and Amanda has been absolute. My sister Martha heard through the family grapevine that they put their own house on the market last month, a smaller place in a less fashionable suburb. I suppose without the promise of my inheritance to secure their future, the cost of their beautiful life and their coveted kitchen renovation became a burden they could no longer afford. There is a certain grim justice in that, but it brings me no joy. The price of that justice, however, has been Leo. As I feared, they have cut him off from me completely. My calls go unanswered. My birthday card was returned unopened. The loss of him is a constant, dull ache in my heart, a wound that I know will never fully heal. He is the innocent victim in his parents' self-inflicted tragedy. I can only pray that one day, when he is old enough to seek his own answers, he will come find me. I will be here, and I will tell him the truth. In the weeks after the dinner, after I had boxed up the digital frame and banished it to the darkness of the hall closet, I made a conscious choice. I had been given a glimpse of a false, curated digital connection. Now I would seek out the real thing. I have thrown myself back into the world, not the virtual one, but the real, tangible one. I have reconnected with old friends. I joined a local gardening club. I even started volunteering 2 days a week at the town library. Mid-turtly sex where the stories are bound in paper, not broadcast on a screen. My relationship with my sister has never been stronger. We speak every day. She and my cousin Sarah have become my staunchest allies, my true family. We have rebuilt our own small, strong circle, found it not just on shared history, but on a shared understanding of loyalty and truth. I sold the expensive cashmere sweater my children gave me for my 70th birthday. I used the money to buy dozens of new books for the children's section at the library. It felt like a worthy trade. I am sitting now on my porch swing, the one Tom installed, a cup of warm tea in my hands. The air is sweet with the smell of damp earth and new beginnings. I am planting a new bed of flowers this year, bright, cheerful zinnias that ask for nothing but sun and water. The house behind me is no longer a silent, lonely museum of my past. It is my home, a place of peace that I fought for, that I reclaimed. The digital photo frame promised me connection. It promised I would never be out of the loop. But the connection it offered was an illusion, a stream of beautiful lies that hid a terrible truth. I have learned that true connection isn't about a constant feed of images. It's about honesty. It's about respect. It's about showing up, not just on a screen, but in a person's life. I have lost a son, and the grief of that is a part of me now. But I have found myself again. I am not the frail, needy, slightly confused old woman they tried to make me. I am Catherine, a sister, a friend, a volunteer, a gardener, a woman living an honest, quiet life in a house that is completely and truly her own. And that is a story worth telling.